There is a light inside you that survived moments you were never meant to survive, even when you felt empty, even when you went silent, even when you questioned who you were becoming. Something in you stayed awake, not loud, not visible, but unbroken. And if you're listening to this right now, it's because that light is ready to be remembered. There is a light within you that does not ask permission to. There is a light inside you that survived moments you were never meant to survive, even when you felt empty, even when you went silent, even when you questioned who you were becoming. Something in you stayed awake, not loud, not visible, but unbroken. And if you're listening to this right now, it's because that light is ready to be remembered. There is a light within you that does not ask permission to exist. It does not need applause, recognition, or proof. It was there before disappointment taught you to doubt yourself, before loss convinced you that something essential had been taken, before the world's noise tried to bury your quiet knowing. This light has survived moments you thought would break you completely. It remained when your voice went silent, when your confidence fractured, when hope felt irresponsible. Even now, as you question whether you are still becoming who you were meant to be, that light is still awake, not flickering, not fading, waiting. The truth is not that you lost your way, it's that you were temporarily taught to look for yourself in places that could never reflect you. You may have mistaken exhaustion for emptiness or silence for absence, but light does not disappear just because the room grows dark. In fact, darkness only reveals how real it is. Every time you felt unseen yet continued forward, every time you chose restraint instead of reaction, every time you endured quietly while something in you kept observing, learning, strengthening. That was the light working in ways no one could measure. The world celebrates loud survival, visible success, dramatic victories, but your light has been refined in the unseen moment. The nights you held yourself together without witnesses, the mornings you rose even when motivation didn't arrive with you. This kind of light doesn't burn fast, it lasts. There are forces that benefit when you forget this. Systems, people, even past versions of yourself that learn to survive by dimming down. You were taught that being bright invites danger, that standing fully in your truth attracts resistance, that it's safer to soften your edges and shrink your presence. So you adapted, you learned how to blend, how to wait, how to carry power quietly. But adaptation was never erasure. What was covered was not extinguished. The light within you learned patience. It learned timing. It learned how to grow stronger without drawing attention, the way roots deepen underground before anything breaks the surface. Understand this. What cannot be destroyed will often be delayed. What cannot be silenced will often be tested. The heaviness you felt was not a sign of weakness. It was pressure. And pressure does not exist to crush what is false. It exists to refine what is real. Every challenge that tried to harden you without breaking you, every disappointment that forced you inward, every pause that felt like stagnation was actually preparation. The light within you was learning how to hold its shape under weight, how to stay steady when circumstances shifted, how to glow without depending on external fuel. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not starting over. You are emerging with awareness you did not have before. There is a reason your growth feels quieter now, because it is deeper. Surface light dazzles quickly and burns out just as fast. Yours was built to endure. That is why it survived misunderstanding, isolation, betrayal, and self-doubt. That is why even in moments where you questioned your worth, something inside you still refused to surrender. You didn't quit. You conserved. You didn't disappear. You recalibrated. So pause here. Feel this truth without rushing past it. The light within you never dies because it was never dependent on conditions being perfect. It was forged through imperfection, through waiting, through becoming. And right now, even if you don't feel powerful, even if you don't feel certain, even if you're standing in the middle of unanswered questions, that light is still present, still watching, still preparing to rise in a way that cannot be undone. At some point, you began to measure your light by outcomes instead of endurance. You started asking whether it was working, whether it was visible enough, whether it had produced the life you imagine by now. But light was never meant to be evaluated by speed or external reward. Some light exists simply to guide you through terrain that would have swallowed you whole without it. Some light exists to keep your spirit intact while the outer world rearranges itself. You were never failing. You were surviving with integrity.
And that kind of survival leaves marks not on the surface, but deep in the core of who you are becoming. There were seasons when your light had to pull inward to protect itself. Times when openness would have been dangerous, when expression would have cost you peace, when trust would have been misplaced. So you learned containment, you learned discernment, you learned how to hold your fire without letting it burn everything around you. That wasn't weakness, it was intelligence. A flame exposed too early is easily extinguished. A flame guarded grows stronger, steadier, more controlled. The world doesn't often teach this. It mistakes restraint for fear and quiet for insignificance. But you know the difference now. You've lived it. You may still carry moments of grief for who you were before the hard lessons arrived, before awareness complicated innocence, before clarity demanded courage. And that grief is valid, but it is not a signal to return backward. It is proof that you crossed a threshold. Once light expands, it cannot shrink back into ignorance. Once you see, you cannot unsee. What feels like heaviness is often the weight of understanding. What feels like distance from others is often alignment with yourself. The light within you didn't make life easier, it made it truer. Notice how different you move now. You respond instead of react. You observe instead of chase. You choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you understand timing. This is the light maturing. Early light seeks validation. Mature light seeks clarity. It doesn't rush to be understood. It doesn't demand to be seen. It waits, not passively, but precisely, until the moment it can no longer be ignored. You are not dimming, you are refining. There is also a quiet strength forming in you, the kind that doesn't announce itself. You've learned that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every door needs to be forced open. This discernment is light in its most advanced form. It sees beyond ego. It senses when to step forward and when to remain still. And stillness, when chosen consciously, becomes power. The world may overlook it, but life responds to it. If you listen closely, you'll realize something important. Your light has been guiding you even when you thought you were lost. It led you away from what would have diminished you. It slowed you down when speed would have cost you your soul. It stripped away illusions so you could see what actually mattered. Nothing was wasted, not the delays, not the detours, not even the disappointments. They were shaping a light that does not flicker under pressure, a light that holds steady when circumstances change. There comes a moment when you realize that your light was never meant to fit comfortably into every space. Some environments are dim, not because light is absent, but because it would expose what has been hidden for too long. This is why you may have felt out of place even when you tried to belong, why certain rooms felt heavy despite appearing full, why alignment sometimes required distance. Your light carries truth, and truth rearranges things. It doesn't adapt to false structures, it reveals them. That realization can feel lonely at first, but it is also liberating. You were not rejected, you were incompatible with what could not grow. You may notice now that people respond differently to you. Some feel drawn to your presence without knowing why. Others feel unsettled, defensive, or distant. This is not because you changed your behavior dramatically. It's because your light stabilized. When light stops flickering, it becomes a mirror. It reflects what others avoid seeing in themselves. That reflection can inspire growth or trigger resistance. Neither is your responsibility. Your only task is to remain authentic to the frequency you've cultivated through patience,
self-awareness, and restraint. There was a time when you dimmed yourself to preserve harmony. You softened truths, minimized your needs, delayed your becoming so others could feel comfortable. But comfort built on self-abandonment is not peace, it is quiet erosion. The light within you remembers every time you chose yourself after being exhausted by compromise. Each of those moments restored something essential. You didn't become harsher, you became clearer. You didn't lose empathy, you gained boundaries. And boundaries are not walls, they are filters that protect what matters. This clarity is why you no longer chase connection the way you once did. You recognize that what is aligned will not require pursuit. Light attracts naturally. It does not plead, it does not perform. It remains steady and lets what resonates come forward. What doesn't align will drift away on its own, sometimes quietly, sometimes dramatically, but always necessarily. This is not loss, this is alignment unfolding in real time. There is also a growing sense of self-trust emerging in you. You question less, over-explain less, and tolerate confusion less. Not because you've hardened, but because you've learned to listen inward. The light within you has become a compass rather than a spotlight. It doesn't illuminate everything at once. It reveals just enough for the next step. And that is how real growth happens. Incrementally, intentionally, without spectacle. If you pause and look honestly, you'll see that you are no longer seeking permission to exist fully. You are no longer asking the world to confirm your worth. You are simply being. And that is what makes your light undeniable. It is no longer something you prove, it is something you embody. And embodiment cannot be undone by doubt, delay, or denial. At this stage, your light no longer seeks confirmation. It moves with an internal authority that does not need to announce itself. You've reached a point where approval feels optional, and misunderstanding no longer feels threatening. This didn't happen overnight. It came from watching yourself survive moments that should have dismantled you, and realizing they didn't, they refined you. When someone questions your path now, it doesn't destabilize you the way it once did. You've learned that certainty does not come from consensus, it comes from alignment. And alignment is something only you can feel. There is a calm confidence forming in you that cannot be rushed or replicated. It shows in the way you pause before responding, in the way you no longer rush to explain yourself, in the way your energy stays grounded even when others are reactive. This is light that has learned discipline. It understands that power is most effective when it is controlled, not scattered. You don't need to dominate conversations or prove your insight. Your presence carries weight because it is rooted, intentional, and steady. You may notice that life has begun testing you differently. The chaos isn't as loud anymore. It's subtler. The distractions are more refined. The choices require discernment rather than force. This is not coincidence. When light strengthens, tests evolve. You are no longer being asked whether you can survive pressure. You are being asked whether you can remain yourself within opportunity, recognition, or responsibility. Integrity becomes the new challenge. Staying true becomes more important than being seen. This is also why you may feel a growing intolerance for what is superficial. Empty conversations drain you. Performative connections feel hollow. You crave depth, meaning, and truth, not because you are better than others, but because your light is no longer satisfied with placeholders. It wants substance, it wants resonance, it wants to contribute to something real. This desire is not impatience, it is readiness. What's forming inside you now is not urgency, it's inevitability. You're no longer pushing for outcomes, you're preparing for alignment. And alignment brings movement without force. When the moment arrives, you won't need to scramble or convince. Things will respond to you naturally. Doors will open without you knocking. People will recognize your value without you announcing it. This is how light moves when it is fully owned. Take a moment to notice how different you feel compared to who you were at the beginning of your journey. Not louder, not flashier, just clearer, more anchored, more intentional. That clarity is the signal. The light within you has reached a point where it no longer needs protection. It needs expression. And what comes next is not a reaction to the world, but a contribution to it. When the light within you is fully acknowledged, it no longer stays contained. It begins to shape the space around you, not through force, persuasion, or performance, but through consistency. People may not immediately understand what draws them to you, only that something feels steady in your presence. Your words carry weight because they are chosen, not scattered. Your silence carries even more because it is intentional. This is how light influences without trying. It doesn't push. It alters the atmosphere simply by being stable. You might notice that others begin to open up around you, sometimes unexpectedly. They share things they don't usually voice, reveal truths they've kept hidden, or seek your perspective without knowing why. This is not coincidence. Light invites honesty. When someone feels seen without being judged, guarded layers soften. But remember, being a safe presence does not mean becoming a container for everyone else's burdens. Discernment remains essential. Not every story is yours to hold. Not every need is yours to meet. Your light now understands the balance between generosity and preservation. You no longer give from depletion. You no longer mistake self-sacrifice for virtue. What you offer comes from fullness, not obligation. And because of this, what you give carries clarity instead of resentment. Boundaries are no longer defenses. They are structures that protect your capacity to contribute meaningfully. This is maturity, not distance. This is self-respect in motion. There may be moments when you question why your progress feels subtle despite how much you've grown. But subtlety is the language of lasting change. Loud impact fades quickly. Quiet impact rewires foundations. Your influence may not always be immediately visible, but it is cumulative. Every interaction shaped by your presence, every moment steadied by your calm, every decision made with integrity compounds over time. Light that endures rarely announces itself. You are also learning that expression does not always mean explanation. Sometimes the most powerful message is lived, not spoken. You don't need to convince anyone of your truth. Your alignment communicates it for you. When action and intention match, clarity becomes self-evident. This is why you feel less pressure to justify your choices. You trust them, and trust changes how you move. What's unfolding now is not expansion for the sake of visibility, but expansion for the sake of contribution. Your light wants to serve something larger than validation. It wants to create, guide, stabilize, and inspire. Not through noise, but through presence. You are stepping into a phase where impact is not measured by attention, but by transformation. And transformation begins quietly, long before it is recognized. At the deepest level, and the light within you is not something you use, it is something you are. It existed before ambition shaped your goals and before fear taught you caution. It has outlived versions of you that were still learning who they were allowed to become. This is why no season truly erased you. You may have changed direction, pace, or expression, but your essence remained intact. Light does not need continuity of circumstance to survive. It only needs truth. And truth is the one thing you never abandoned, even when you doubted everything else. What you carry now is not just resilience, but remembrance. You remember who you are beneath roles, expectations, and outcomes. You remember that your worth was never conditional on productivity, approval, or recognition. This remembrance brings peace, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop negotiating with forces that never defined you. When you stand in this knowing, comparison loses its grip. Urgency fades. You move with patience because you understand that what is real does not rush its own arrival. There will still be moments of quiet challenge, but they will no longer shake your foundation. Doubt may visit, but it won't move in. Uncertainty may appear, but it won't override your direction. You've learned the difference between inner warning and outer noise. This discernment is the final refinement of light. It allows you to remain open without being unguarded, present without being consumed, strong without becoming rigid. Balance becomes instinctive rather than effortful. Your light also carries legacy, even if you never name it that way. Every time you choose clarity over confusion, restraint over reaction, integrity over convenience, you leave an imprint. Not all influence is public, not all impact is recorded, but the way you move through the world subtly shifts others, offering permission to be steadier, truer, more self-honoring. This is how light multiplies without dividing itself. You are no longer becoming, you are being. And being is the most powerful state. There is no performance in it, no striving, no proving, just alignment. When life meets you now, it does not meet resistance or hesitation. It meets presence. And presence cannot be extinguished because it does not depend on outcome. It exists regardless of recognition. So let this settle deeply. The light within you never dies because it was never borrowed. It was not granted by circumstance, and it cannot be taken by loss. It is not a phase, a mood, or a moment. It is your constant. And as long as you remain true to it, nothing you walk through will ever be able to undo who you are becoming.